if you're going to hide behind something, make sure that it is a fragrant scented geranium. So today I'm going to talk about planting a huge hanging basket and a number of little tips. And then also at the end, you guys, I'll make sure to put an inclusive plant list of what I am putting in here. Now, true confessions, because this is so big, even on this pot, it was a little bit wobbly. And so I went ahead and put in a lot of my potting mix while Stuart held it securely so I wouldn't knock it over. Now, what was in my potting blend? Well, it's a lightweight potting mix. I added some Osmocote, and even though I don't have it here to show you, I also added some vermiculite. You could also use perlite, and what that does is just lighten up the soil even more, because by the time this gets watered, it's going to be very, very heavy. And I'll put links to both vermiculite and perlite below. Now, my other ingredients for this, Stuart, if you would show them. So I think this is going to work. I'm a little bit smug and and a little bit pleased with myself, only if it works. But you guys know my constant ongoing battle with squirrels. And I love these coir liners. And by the way, this basket is one of them that's in my new QVC line. I love the coir liners. But no matter what, it seems that they get pecked at by squirrels and birds because they like to use it as nesting material. So I decided that what I would do, and again, I will give credit to whatever follower it was who told me to use pieces of tulle as a squirrel preventative, as a squirrel repellent. So I thought, if it works to cover up a pot that I've just seeded, why wouldn't it work to line this basket before I put the coir liner in? And you can see here that it just practically disappears. I've still got a little bit of it to pull up, and I'll do some side tidying up and side sculpting after I get this all finished. So the stars of this basically are scented geraniums. I've got some just regular old pink begonias. I've got some, I think this is pink flare. I'll let you know exactly what it is. This is a verbena, but notice that all of these colors are very much in the same color palette. And then on this side, Stuart, if you don't mind coming around, I've got some gypsophilia, some baby's breath, and again, I'll put all of these plants, I'll put them in the list at the end of the video. I like that kind of gray color. Now you might say, oh my gosh, these scented geraniums are so rambunctious, they're going to cover up everything else. And yes, they are, but I will do some judicious pruning on them after I get it all composed. Now, here is a container garden trick in general that I do sometimes, not all of the time, but in this case, I definitely did. So Stuart, if you can show what I did, and this, by the way, must be a golden edge scented geranium. What I did was I put the plants in place in their containers, and then I filled the voids with potting soil. Now, what that is going to do is leave me the perfect amount of space to then kind of input these plants exactly where I want them to be. So I'm going to now remove this bottom pot, get it out of the way. And for all of you who have always requested that I get a Lazy Susan, I've got one. I just hardly ever remember to use it. So there, see, I've got my Lazy Susan, you guys. I get so anxious about starting a project that I don't always have everything I need right in place. So I'm going to start out, I think, with this big guy. So what I'm going to do is take this pot out, and really it would be kind of helpful if you had a helper but Stuart is my helper photographically. See, he's actually going to hold that. Can you hold that? And, oh my gosh, that is a true talent. A guy who can hold a basket and hold a camera at the same time. So now I'm going to take this out. And you can see, as messy as it is, that it fits perfectly in that spot. Could you capture that while holding the basket, Stuart? Okay, that's great. Now, with these other smaller ones, it's not going to be so difficult. So I kind of like, someone, I can't remember who it was, told me that their OCD goes crazy because I don't always center things exactly. I kind of like things a little bit asymmetrical. I think it's because I've got an informal garden with a lot of asymmetry in it. So even in my plantings and in my table arrangements, so you can see here, I've got this beautiful verbena. And what is this? This is Empress Flare Pink. And I like, the thing about verbena is, I think it really has a delicate, sweet, romantic quality, but it really needs to be deadheaded, you guys. Okay, so see, I have just the perfect amount of space for that little beauty. Okay, now I'm gonna do the same thing over here with this one. I've got 2 pots of this. And I fully anticipate that in the heat, see how perfectly that just plops down in there? It's very satisfying, you guys. It's very satisfying when that happens that way. Stuart's laughing at me. It doesn't take much for me, does it, Stuart? Now, these little tiny begonias, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna put them kind of as a fluffy skirt around the perimeter, and you'll notice that these I did not already put into place because these have a root ball that's small enough that I can just kind of dig with my fingers and make gaps for them. And I have moistened and watered all of these components really well, you guys. And you'll notice that as I begin to plant, that it gets actually a little bit sturdier and not so wobbly because the weight is equally distributed around the circumference of the basket itself. Now, someone commented, they were one of our across the pond followers, and they said that it drives her crazy that we Americans don't plant our hanging baskets all the way around. Now, if you wanted to do that, and sometimes I do, but because this one has so many cascading elements, I really don't have to. You can just take, a serrated knife or some scissors, and you can just cut an X in that core liner, and before you fill it, just take, say, one of these begonias, and it helps if you slip it in a baggie, and then before you fill it up with dirt, then you just put that in there and it will grow out the side. Stuart's nodding his head. Did my description without a show and tell make sense, Stuart? So that's what you, Stuart's laughing at me. That's what you can do. But again, this one is going to have so many cascading elements that if I planted it on the side, it might also almost be too full, because I promise this is going to continue to grow and spill out of this. So now I'm going to move this little begonia. I never have claimed to be a neat gardener. Now, I'm a perfectionist and very fastidious once everything is finally in place and keeping it that way, but in getting it into place and in planting it, not so much, I guess. And I'm kind of the same way in the kitchen. Okay, so this is, I believe this is a peppermint rose, you guys. Look at that beautiful root ball. And see the void there? Stuart, did you capture it? Watch. That just makes me happy. It makes me happy. Again, it doesn't take much in a gardener's life to please them. So I'm just going to tuck in a few more begonias. And these begonias are just regular old bedding cushion begonias, but I promise you, in this part sun, part shade environment, they will get really, really large. Now, I don't know if I mentioned whether or not I put Osmocote in my prepared soil, but I did. And probably I'll also sprinkle some across the top once I get it finished, because hanging baskets typically, especially in our hot drying Oklahoma winds, need to be watered pretty frequently. It's one of the reasons I like larger hanging baskets rather than smaller ones, because the sheer volume of the soil will retain moisture for longer, and you don't have to water them quite as much. Okay, I've got one more over here that I'm going to pluck into place. And I have never used this, you guys. This is Philo White Baby's Breath. This is a new one for me, but I like the fact that it's got kind of very pretty gray foliage, and look at, isn't that just a gorgeous textural contrast, I think? And this too will have kind of an airy quality. So it's these plants that have a delicate, airy, in some cases ferny quality against the broad leaves of the very fragrant scented geraniums that I really like. So I'll just put in a little bit more soil. Make sure I don't leave any gaps. And voila, I've got a really gorgeous hanging basket. Now, I am going to tend this, and I'm going to do some snipping on it, but you know what I'm going to do first? I'm going to hang it first. That way I'll be able to see how all of these long branches cascade and fall. So Stuart and I will come back after it's hanging up, and I'll show you how I tweak it and snip it. So now you can see maybe why I hang it first before I start clipping, because I kind of want to see how everything falls. Now, what I love about this large hanging basket, and I did the same thing last year, is I've hung it very low. So that's another reason I wasn't concerned about planting 360, planting all around the entire sphere and just planting on top, because it's low enough that not only can I see all of this, but I can also smell it. So it's just really, really very sensual in every regard. Now, a lot of these things are kind of cascading around the edge. And this is going to, especially as it heats up, this is going to continue to grow like gangbusters. Now, some of you will ask, well, do these scented geraniums bloom? And yes, they do. There's a sweet little pink bud. But the blooms, here's another one, Stuart, the blooms are far more delicate in nature, and it's really all about the foliage, though I think these sweet little ethereal blooms are a nice accompaniment. So I'm going to start snipping a little bit, which will make it overall look a little bit bushier, and I'm also going to snip off any blemished leaves. Now, Stuart and I were talking that it's kind of a cold, raw day. That's how we would describe it if we were writing a novel. But Stuart also commented that it's the perfect kind of light for shooting, which is true. It's also the perfect kind of weather, as cool and kind of as messy as it is, for planting, because your plants just don't have the shock of being exposed to high drying winds, which is always a danger here, or too much sun, too bright of sun. They have a chance to kind of get their feet settled before and while they put out their root system, and before it starts getting a little bit warmer. Because I've always said, I have what I call my gardening manifesto, that there's 2 seasons in the South. There's before the heat and there's after the heat. And this also demonstrates another in my gardening manifesto, and that is don't let your plants boss you. So I'm going to torture some of these branches a little bit to get them to do what I want them to do. And here are a couple of things. And by the way, you guys, always have a bucket or something with water in it, so that when you take off clippings that are substantial enough to try to root, that you can immediately put those in water. So I have done that. Some of these long tendrils, if I wanted them to kind of cascade and create, again, that kind of skirt effect around the edge, what you can do is take some of these irrigation picks, or in some cases, just these little floral picks. I always have these in my garden trug. And then, depending on the growth pattern of whatever it is, you can then secure them with those picks, or in this case, I don't need the picks, because what I can do is just tuck a leaf underneath there, secure it taut, and then you can see that it grows around the edge. That is kind of a nifty thing. Now again, over time, I will continue to clip on this. Do I wish it were already filled out in perfection with all of the color that I anticipate to come immediately? Yes, but gardeners have to be patient, and I will so enjoy the process of checking on it every day to see what it's doing. Some of these larger leaves that get a little bit tattered in the process of planting, and just in the wind, I'll take off some of the larger leaves. And what that does is it will give a little peek into the soil, which creates some depth to the container itself, and also will give light to some of these little begonias that are here. So see some of these scraggly leaves, limp leaves, I'm going to take those off. I'm going to remember, and this, again, remember you guys, you'll have to deadhead and feed this about weekly. And again, I do anticipate that during the summer, some of the blooming will slow down as it gets hot, but that's okay. Sometimes we can accept things if we know they're going to happen, because I also know that this will start looking beautiful again in the fall. And I will put a link to my friend Monica's website, so if you're in the Oklahoma City area, you can maybe get some of your own scented geraniums. Other than that, I'm going to guess that in your area, you'll probably have to get them from a local nursery, an independent nursery. You're not going to probably ever find these at a big box store, or at maybe an herb festival. So make sure to support those peeps so that they can continue to supply us with beauties like this. And by the way, this is a straight shot to my back door, you guys. And Stuart, I'll let you, as a parting shot, kind of pan around this way and see what it will look like if you're coming out the back door. It's fragrant, it's beautiful, and I'm really pleased with the result. Now it just needs to fill in.